Friends, welcome into another edition of the Soccer Tejas Podcast. I'm Alex Parra. It's always a pleasure and an honor to be with you. And thanks to all of you that have been following us as we ramp up this new brand, the Soccer Tejas brand, and talk a little soccer from many perspectives. Somewhat related to Houston and to Texas is what we strive to do. But enough about me. Why don't we bring in El Plato Fuerte, the main course, if you will, with my colleagues. You see them now on screen. We welcome in first tonight, Laura Gomez. First of all, Laura, how are you? It's Halloween. I know you're excited. Welcome to Soccer Tejas. How are you?
I'm doing well. Happy to be here. Another episode. Just getting started, and yeah, I mean, I'm a big Halloween Christmas person, so I've been celebrating since September.
So show me that T-shirt. It says "The Witch City." Do we need to know? Is it?
Yeah. Well, I'll let you know more about it once we start talking about Boss Nation. I mean, it's just in the same city, and it's Salem, Massachusetts.
Salem.
30 minutes away from Boston.
All right, don't put a spell on me, or put a good one on me if
I'll
you
put
can.
a hex. You don't know.
No hex, no. I need all the help I can get. Speaking of help, and speaking of needing help, you see him on screen, and I'm just kidding, the one and only Victor Araiza. Don Victor, how are you this afternoon, evening, day? Welcome. Oh, I just lost you, by the way, Victor. So if we had audio.
No, here we go. See, I need all the help I can get.
Yep,
Doing well.
technologically.
Always a pleasure to be on here with you, both of you. Laura, if you can put a spell that'll bring Alex's hair color back, that'll help us all.
The toupee's falling off. The white is getting grayer.
So, easy on the eyes.
But as Laura and I were talking off air, at least we're still here, Laura, right? So we're proud and honored to be here. So thanks to all of you friends, by the way, that are with us. We really do appreciate it. A lot to talk about. So why don't we get started? Victor, this past weekend, the Houston Dynamo beating the LA Galaxy, last regular season game at the Shell, and on to the playoffs for the second consecutive year. Victor, in general terms, how do you see the team going into the playoffs?
Well, first of all, let's start with the crowd, because I think that's something we finished the last podcast with. The team was announcing that there was limited tickets during the week. They announced a sellout. Wasn't a full house. I wanted to witness it in person just to get these details right. I imagine on their technicalities, tickets distributed, whatever it is, the metric they used to measure the attendance, it was a sellout. But it was a good crowd nonetheless, and it was obviously a great result at the end. Repercussions across the league, because it ended up giving LAFC the number one seed in the Western Conference. Galaxy fell to number two. So it was exciting all around, put the attention on Houston a little bit. And, in the end, they ended up with the fifth seed. They will face Seattle, which I don't know if that's necessarily the matchup they wanted for the playoffs, which was, kind of a part of this game. And the Galaxy had tied it on a penalty kick, in the dying minutes before, in the +9 or whatever it was at that point, 10 minutes into stoppage time. Daniel Steres got some payback on his former team, and that was the winning goal. But for a moment there, it looked like Houston was going to face Real Salt Lake, which I know was a big hope maybe for some of the fans, since they've had some good games against RSL. They've already beat them in the Open Cup last year in the playoffs. But I think to get a good barometer of where this team really is, I like this matchup with Seattle, and let's see what they're made of.
Victor, without a doubt, we'll talk a little bit about the matchup that's coming up for short term in the playoffs for the Houston Dynamo. Laura, in general terms, how do you see the Dynamo season, what they've accomplished, and what they need to accomplish? We spoke about this on our last podcast. It's really about winning, and maybe winning it all, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think that it was a very exciting game. And sometimes the games, unfortunately for the Dynamo, aren't exciting games. I do want to mention that I think that they did hit a mark. They did not hit a mark. I think that they kind of lost an opportunity to actually gain new followers in like moments like this, right? You're in the playoffs, you tie, then you end up winning. It's against a team that's very well known. And by having it only on Apple TV for a home game, that that is upsetting to me, because I think that it should be in a local, how it used to be a million years ago, that all the home games for all the different teams in Houston were in local channels. So anybody, Pepito, Pepita, everybody, John, Joanne, everybody could watch a game because it was a home game. Therefore, it was in a local channel. And it really upsets me because my dad, I'm going to give you an example. My 73-year-old dad was like, hey, I want to watch the game. And I was like, well, I want to watch it too. I'm like, but we're not subscribed to Apple TV. I was doing also helping out Victor. He was actually at the game, and I was doing social media for Soccer Tejas, but I couldn't watch the game. So I had to look for other ways to kind of follow also the game, and then I started to think, I'm like, it's really upsetting, because if you know that the Dynamo fan base isn't as strong, and you're not going to have it for, you're in the playoffs, you're doing something big, and you're not going to have it in local channels. Yeah, it might be out of their hands. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. They signed it before. I don't care. I think that it's something that, games that are at home need to be fought for by the team for it to be accessible to everyone. So I think that, yeah, it's exciting. Yeah, they're doing this. But for me, I just really think that they missed it, knowing that they're not as big. They're not the biggest team in Houston. Like, you should let people watch that game.
So, Laura, do you think that should apply then for important games for the entire season? They've made a decision, the MLS have, and we'll talk to Victor here shortly about going with Apple TV. No release as far as information regarding ratings. Is the product selling well, etc.? We don't know that, but yeah, for many of us, it's playoff time, and we go to our traditional sources, many of them local calls, right? So I guess maybe, I don't want to put words in your mouth, this should be throughout the season or now for the playoffs. Do you think there should be a push to have more accessibility when it comes to the Houston fan base?
Look, let me tell you this. In Colombia, they tried to do something similar, and it went for a couple of years. And then they saw people not watching the games, not paying, because they were like, we're not going to do this. Like, they're home games. You should be able to watch it at home if you can't afford, or working, you can't go and watch the team when they're playing in the stadium. So I think in the ideal world for me, how it used to be, I want to say maybe 10 years ago, that I could watch the Rockets, the Astros, the Arrows when we had them, the Comets, we used to be able to watch them at your house without having any of the big shebang, different apps or different channels on TV. And then one day, out of nowhere, like, I can't watch the Rockets game. I can't do this because now you have to buy something else. It's always about money at the end of the day. But I also think that knowing that your fan base isn't as big as it should be, at least the playoff games should be available to everyone, so they can actually get bandwagon fans, forever fans, maybe fans, soccer fans to watch them.
Victor, your take on the accessibility, on getting the excitement going. I here agree with Laura in the sense, I remember the Houston Rockets championships, and it was a celebration throughout the city. It was anticipation. You found a way to get to a screen, and the product itself was available. And that united many of us. It gave us excited. It excited many of us. And years later, literally 20-some years later or more, we're still remembering those days. I'm trying to remember the championships for the Houston Dynamo in the Dominic Kinnear days, and I don't remember its accessibility as much. I remember being present at the MLS Cup Finals. I think one was in Dallas for sure, at Frisco, if I'm not mistaken. But the point is, Victor, should the MLS have the playoffs at least more accessible to all of us?
Yeah, well, I do think it is a little bit more accessible, because I think some of those games back then were like on the Fox Soccer channel. You had to pay for that on top of your cable package. And I didn't think, it varies through the years. I agree with Laura to a sense. I think it should be as accessible as it can be. I know there's some, like the Inter Miami game, right, in the playoffs, that's going to be on Apple TV, but I think they're opening that to, basically anybody that has an Apple account can watch that one for free. I think they're going to simulcast it on TikTok, so that'll be something interesting to see. Some games still are shared with Fox Sports. I believe TUDN has the rights to a few of them too, maybe the final. So I think there's still room there to have them on linear television, but the other side of this is Laura has to get with the times. She just got to pay for Apple TV. Come on, it's as easy as can be.
We did,
and maybe that's the reason why there was more people in the stadium on Saturday night. They didn't want to bother paying for the subscription, but No, look, I'll add to this. You know, it's hard to find a perfect balance too, because
Sure.
I don't know if they were getting, you know, on Space City or whatever it was before, AT&T or Root Sports. I don't know if they were connecting with as many fans either way. I think you're always going to have that hurdle. I do think, while the Apple TV stuff's out of their control, this is where the Dynamo, the club, could take advantage of other ways to either have a weekly show on an over-the-air channel locally, right? Austin, for example, has that. You know, I know the Dynamo had that a few years back on Cube TV, on and off, sort of. You can do that in Spanish, you can do that in English. A recap show, if you will, right, to catch people up on TV, on YouTube, whatever. I think this is where you miss a little bit of the lack of a radio stream, right? We have it in Spanish, so I think there's that, but you don't have one in English. You know, the radio programs they would have weekly, just things around the team that continue the conversation. I think that's where they missed the mark, to basically do everything else that, or even on Apple itself. I think you don't have to have season pass to catch some of the programming there.
Sure.
But, you know, that's a separate conversation, and we're going to go into a different rabbit hole there. In the end, it's what it is. This is a TV package that NFL, that the MLS chose. It's going to stay this way for a long time, and you might just have to bite the bullet and buy the Apple MLS season pass.
You know, I do like the
Never.
Never. She says never. I think the phrase you used, Victor, is the correct one. Continue the conversation immediately after the match. If you're subject now to what MLS has decided to do, and that's the mantra, and that's what you're going to follow, and the owners have decided, you know what, this is going to work for us. What else can you do? Which means thinking, which means creativity. In Houston, it means being multilingual and getting the word out and continuing the conversation, getting the excitement built up. I am proud that it was a sellout, and we can debate whether or not every single seat was paid for, but it was a sellout, and we will take it as such, and it builds great momentum going into the playoffs. I want to switch gears, and Victor, I'll start with you. On the field, how do you see this MLS cuadro building up? And in a moment, we'll also talk about Miami, and to me, the predestination that I think exists for Messi and company in Miami. That's what I believe the league wants to see. But let's go through the bracket, if you will, Victor, on what you're thinking this looks like. And you can start with the matchup you spoke of, obviously Seattle against Houston.
Well, my issue with Dynamo all season has been, is it built to win in the playoffs? You know, I think the getting to the playoffs part, that should be almost automatic. You should be counting on that. That's why when it's, well, our goal is just, you know, to make the playoffs, you're not being proactive in my mind if that's your only goal. What do I mean by that? I mean, I think they have some good players, right? Hector Herrera, Carrasquilla, I think could reach a top level. Steve Clark's having a good season. That defense has some good pillars there with Vyachenko and Mikael. Ezequiel Ponce could potentially go on a hot streak here and score. But can they beat the contenders in this league? The LAFCs, the Seattle Sounders, Inter Miami, or Columbus, if they were able to get to an MLS Cup final. I still have my doubts. I prefer them getting Seattle here out of the gate. And actually, this format, this best of three, benefits the Dynamo, because remember, they don't have to actually win a game. They can just go to penalties, win on penalties, and that counts as a win. Whereas in the later rounds, I mean, they would actually have to beat them outright. So, but can they beat a team like Seattle that has a coach like Brian Schmetzer, that has won MLS Cups before, that has a good home field advantage? I think for me, that's still a doubt. And that's why I don't buy a lot into, you know, these are some great moments, and for fans that wait a long time to see their team win, good. But, you know, ultimately, what are you going to be able to do, and can you build off of it? The building off part, I think, is to be seen. That's why, you know, again, that's a separate conversation. Sure. But can they beat these teams? I don't think so. maybe they'll prove me wrong.
We'll see that. Victor, let's work through the Western Conference before the LAFC can have a series. There's a wild card play-in with two teams from the Pacific Northwest, Vancouver and Portland. And friends, you can see this on our screen now. So the winner of that wild card match, which will be the first match taking place here on the 23rd of October, if I'm not mistaken, they'll take on LAFC. Then you see the matchup, Seattle-Houston, Real Salt Lake, Minnesota, and then the LA Galaxy and Colorado. Victor, we can maybe next Monday, our next podcast, talk about who you think will be getting to the semifinals. But how do you see those matchups, and who do you, I guess, getting ahead of ourselves, who do you see coming through the bracket to at least the semis?
Yeah, there's always a surprise, right? And it's always, hard to tell. It could be Colorado, who kind of maybe, goes up and upsets the Galaxy here in one of these stages. Or I think Salt Lake goes through. I think, I think Seattle goes through. I think LAFC goes through independently of who wins that matchup between Vancouver and Portland, which, by the way, was going to be in Vancouver, but because of the scheduling conflict, now it's going to be hosted in Portland. Maybe the fairness there is that at least they tied on points, so it's not too much of a controversy. But geez, what a way to lose on decision day and then lose out on home field advantage. And then on the other side, I think basically everybody's expecting Miami to go through or Columbus to pull the upset, if anybody. So I think there'll be some good tests in these playoffs, and we'll see who the surprises are. Maybe an Atlanta wakes up, or Montreal on that side. But I think otherwise it might be the usual suspects in the final.
And as we continue looking now on the Eastern Conference side, Laura, any comments on the bracket in general? And we'll talk about Miami here shortly. But any teams that may be surprises to you, or teams that maybe have a destiny to continue moving on in the playoffs here in 2024?
I mean, kind of like what Victor said, I do agree that a lot of the teams kind of switch that mindset of kind of becoming, it's kind of like you're erasing everything that happened in the season, and now it's playoffs. It's something different. So a lot of teams really do give you surprises, and a lot of the teams that are going to be in the playoffs have been in the playoffs in a consistent manner. So I think that it's kind of like some of the same names that you kind of see, year in, year out. But, surprises, I hope that the Dynamo surprises. I think that they do have a momentum going.
Victor.
But hold on, I'm not done. I'm like, but will it be enough? I am still a doubter. I don't know that if they can go head to head with those bigger teams that have proven not to be eliminated in the first round. But, hopefully, like I say, every season for the past, 5 years, I'm like, hopefully they'll shut me up and show me different.
Well, we'll see. So that's
the good news. I was going to add, the good news is they have a good road record this year. So I guess if there's a year you prefer to be on the road, this might be it. And I think that best of three, the format, the fact that they go to penalties if they tie, that benefits the Dynamo. But yeah, look, if Miami's to win it all, right, which I think is kind of what everybody's predicting, because look, whatever you may think, they got the best player. They're actually two of the best players in the league. Suarez, we can't forget about him, right? And if it's just kind of impossible to get there, the prize in this is actually that they're in the Western Conference. They're on the other side of that bracket. So just to get to the final, to be on that stage where, the entire world is going to be watching if Messi gets there on Apple TV, accessible to everybody, right? As long as they get through the paywall. But that, I think, is, basically what they had in the Open Cup final, right? Where they had about 1 million viewers on Telemundo or whatever other channel they were. Because, maybe the hope that Messi would have been in the final. I think that is the prize here for this season. If they're able to win it all, would be even better. But I think at the very least, that wouldn't be a bad consolation prize.
In general terms, then we'll see where the playoffs take us. Well, obviously, we'll be watching and following the Dynamo matchup. And friends, what do you think? Is this the year that the Dynamo can get to an MLS Cup final again after so many years of a drought, if you will? We mentioned Messi and we mentioned Miami, and I think maybe Laura, we'll start with you. This is a team that now has has accomplished a lot. Not only the Supporter Shield, not only the maximum number of points in the history of the league, if I'm not mistaken, with 74. Victor, you'll have to correct me. The previous max amount was 73. So this is already a team that has accomplished a lot. They've been selected or maybe have gotten into the World Club Championship. Victor and I were talking about this. Give us your take on Miami and how this season is shaping up as maybe the season that Messi stamps his name in the history in American soccer.
Messi is going to be a name that's going to be remembered for centuries. I want to say people have been so obsessed with him, for a while now, and bringing him to the MLS was the smartest thing that he could have done economically and could have done for his, his future and for his legacy. I do think I was listening to different reporters around the world talk about how Miami was kind of given that place. To me, I think that it's unfair to teams that are still waiting to get in, did what they had to do to get in, and they're kind of saying, okay, well, Miami's in, and everybody else is like, well, we're fighting to get in. So like, what's going on? I think it's blatantly very obvious that they want Messi in. And I think that sometimes it's unfair because I think that, he's done so much by himself. He doesn't need that extra push from FIFA or from whoever to be in that. I don't know. It bothers me that it's unfair in a sort of ways to other teams that already did what they had to do to get there. As far as his legacy, I think that, Messi is always going to be a person that will draw people no matter where he goes. He can go to, I don't know, Abu Dhabi and he was going to fill up stadiums. He can go anywhere and he's still going to fill up stadiums because why? Because he has a talent, he has the thing that makes, what he does on the field incredible and what other players can't emulate.
Laura, that said, is this like the history of this league where a figure like David Beckham, right, is almost predetermined? The entire marketing machine is behind him and his success and in his years at LA Galaxy, that team's success. It's almost like it's supposed to be. I don't want to say that it's scripted that way, but that's what the league wants, and not taking anything away from arguably the best player in the history of the sport. And some of you can debate that with me and others in the future, but he's earned it. It hasn't been a fluke. He's definitely been there, and why not celebrate it this way? Is it anticlimactic though to know that? Okay, well, it goes to Miami. And what does that mean for the ratings? And Victor, I'll get back to you. Maybe it isn't a positive because people can say, okay, Messi's got it.
Honestly, I think that comparing to the David Beckham effect is a little bit different because I think that he was more like, in LA and maybe some other places. But I really think that the Messi effect is MLS wide. I think that's even bigger than what David Beckham did, not to, take away anything from what he's done and still doing for the sport. Again, I do think that he, like you said, he's talented enough to get what he needs to get without any extra help because it's not going to benefit him. It's, it's going to benefit him economically, but it's going to benefit the big head honchos economically. Now, what will that do for the sport? I don't know. Maybe we won't see the effects now, but we'll see the effects in a couple years. I just think, again, I want to think that, soccer is a pure sport and that it should be kept that way and that you get to places because you've earned it and not handed to you. But obviously, we know that there's politics and there's marketing and there's a lot of, again, money involved that's going to give you, the upper hand or it's going to give the final decision on what things are done.
That makes sense. Victor, your take on Messi and Miami, not only now being the top seed going into the MLS playoffs, but also what it means for Messi and company to be a few games away from the MLS Cup?
Well, first of all, I think, look, it's funny because everybody was waiting for Miami to be announced to be in this Club World Cup, right? To get the host spot, which is what it is. It's what they got. In other years of the Club World Cup, the smaller version, it goes to the league champion of the previous season, right? I think that's kind of what everybody was expecting. All right, well, maybe the most likely thing is they'll say, well, we're going to award it to the MLS Cup champion this year, which may still be Miami. And if that happens, then maybe it'll, put an end to all this conversation anyways, right? But of course, they do it, putting him in as a Supporters Shield champion. Look, at the end of it, it's the host spot. They can put whoever they want.
Sure.
And, it is obvious, but who cares? I mean, it's also gives a reason to watch. He is still one of the better players in the world. This is going to be part of this is the spectacle, right? And maximizing having Messi in the United States. Look, this doesn't mean that Miami is going to go out and win and be world champions, but it's using the team that has Messi to start the tournament. They've already announced the first match is going to be in Miami.
Right.
It could be against one of the top European teams. We'll see who ends up getting that opponent spot. But this is the big reason why, Messi coming to the United States was a big deal, right? Not just because of the World Cup in 2026, but this is the year before, and this is at the club level. Again, just to maximize that. I don't think it could have been maximized with Beckham because he wasn't an out-and-out goal scorer. I mean, you saw Messi came off the bench the other day, scored a hat trick to win him that game. So, there's still opportunity here to maximize this. Kim, Suarez, obviously you have, the rest of the Barcelona stars there with Busquets and Alba. And there'll be people around the world watching this tournament because of Miami, because of Messi. Hey, if anybody else has a bone to pick with this, you should have qualified by winning the CONCACAF Champions Cup and putting all your efforts there like Seattle did. They got in. Why is nobody talking about that?
Yeah, that's a valid point, and maybe we should be talking about that. Just to give you a little historical perspective, the Supporters Shield this year going with 74 points to Inter Miami. Last year was Cincinnati with 69. LAFC did that 2 years ago with 67 points. Previously, it was in 2021 when New England had 73 points, a team coached by Bruce Arena. So just kind of giving you some of the past winners. And then if you look at the history when Houston, if you guys can remember those days, I'm trying to remember if they have it here. I don't have the total number of points, but it certainly changed, and you're talking about an improvement year in, year out. My last question regarding the MLS playoffs is we really haven't seen a dynasty. Have we, Victor? Do you look back and say this particular team is a dynasty in MLS? The Galaxy have 4 total championships in their history. Is that the closest thing as we remember Beckham and company? Is that the dynasty? And by the way, the Galaxy haven't won a final since 2011. So is this parity important? And next year when the new the new Messi comes into town, or in 2 years, whenever that might be, it's going to change all over again. And that's what we want, the hope that every team, every year can potentially win the championship?
Well, that's what MLS is going for, right? That's what the MLS playoff system is designed to do. Otherwise, if it was based on just points and there'd be maybe it wouldn't be the same schedule. But I think you saw, Miami has the quality to win that. It wouldn't be fair for everybody else. And that's kind of how La Liga and the Premier League and most of the European leagues are based, right? That's what makes MLS different and American leagues different. So I think, certainly from giving you a reason to watch, I don't think that's going to change. Look, as far as dynasties, I think, if you're just strictly talking MLS, going back to those Beckham years might be, the back-to-back championships for the Galaxy, that might be it. Maybe the Dynamo before that, just based on back-to-back titles. But, if you speak more recent memories and we're talking about spreading it a little more across several competitions, I think you have to include Seattle in there a little bit because of the CONCACAF Champions Cup or the Champions League, as it was known in that time, being the third MLS team to win it, having a couple of MLS Cups there between that span. What was it, maybe 5 years or so. Columbus, you could make a case, even though it's not the same players, but winning in 2020 and restructuring that roster to win here recently, making this run to the CONCACAF Champions Cup they did this year. I mean, I think there's some cases there for other teams, but certainly maybe not since Beckham years. Obviously, yeah, I agree with you there.
Victor, I want to correct myself. The Galaxy have actually won 5 MLS Cup championships, so 9 total appearances. So I want to make sure I get that right. Laura, your take on having a dynasty in the MLS?
One of the teams that really clicked for me is the one Columbus. What Victor just mentioned, going through like the restructuring that they did, and the fans being so like dedicated to also going to the stadium and what it means, and so I think I would say them in a sort of sense.
Yeah, they won League Cup this year, by the way, too. Which, I mean, whatever you may think of it, and if you count that trophy, I mean, that's another one.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but they win the other ones too. That's the most important thing. So I think that I would consider them one of the lead ones out of the top of my head. Honestly, I would have to go back and look at the years. But they've always been one of the teams that when I covered MLS, what has been like always mentioned, always kind of like, in the game somehow, somewhere. I mean, they've had their bad seasons, but I think they've always kind of been in the mix somehow.
LAFC could be included in that conversation if they had won just a few more finals too.
Mm-hmm.
That always helps, doesn't it? So, friends, they're talking a little bit about the MLS playoffs 2024, and we'll see how the Houston Dynamo are able to progress, and also maybe the surprise that may come if Messi's team, Miami, are not able to win a championship, and they're certainly the favorites. So let's switch over a little bit to one of the other teams in Houston. And Laura, let's talk a little bit about the NWSL and the Houston Dash. This is a Dash team that is not going to go to the playoffs. They had a successful start to their West Coast swing, facing and beating Maria Sanchez and the team from San Diego. And they just recently played against Seattle, 2-1 loss. And it's a team that's learning every day, a team that's having players come back from injury. How did you see the Dash match versus Seattle in here as they close out the season?
Honestly, it's kind of, to me as a fan, it's sad because you see these players go out there, give it their best, do what they can, and it's just not adding up at the end of the day. That the scoreboard isn't being fair to them in a sort of sense. And I sound so repetitive of saying the same thing over and over, of saying you can only do so much with the tools that you're given. And, this team has been through it for a lot of seasons now. And, it's kind of like that up and down that's been kind of like the norm for the Dash of, getting us a score in, and you're thinking, okay, it could probably be there and they could probably win this game. And at the end of the day, they get overrun, they get beat, and they lose those points. So I think that, I'm happy the season's over. Honestly, I really think that it's almost over. We still have a home game, but I'm happy for it because I think that it's time to really, really, really restructure, rebuild. And hopefully that these owners and, again, these people that are making the decisions really look for a combination that is going to be strong and a good base. I mean, they have players that are amazing. I mean, they have Jane Campbell, they have Sophie Schmidt that have been there through everything, and they're still there, and they're still giving it their all. I mean, Campbell just got called up for, the women's U.S. soccer team, and it's just, to me, unfair sometimes, and I'm wondering how long are these players going to last if the Dash continues to head this way of changing coaches around, year out, year in. So I'm happy that the season's almost over. I really want this team to be successful, not only as a reporter, but also as a woman, also as a Houstonian. I've seen so much potential, and it doesn't go the way that we really think that it's gonna go, and that's sad and frustrating.
Although we know life is not fair, and Victor
I want it.
This is another year of disappointment, and this is piling on previous years of change in the front office, of change in head coaches. I don't know how else to say this without being or sounding critical, but I think, well, Ted Siegel said it, the team has fallen short this season. Coach Ricky agreed to that. I think it's time to make a serious change that will commit the team to a direction, at least in coaches, for the next, at least Laura has said this, 2 or 3 seasons. But they have to find the right situation. They have to find the right person. And it seemed like this year, literally less than 12 months ago, let's say 10 months ago, the optimism, Victor, going into the Dash season was at the highest I'd ever seen. Why did it not become reality?
Well, again, it's hard to say because we don't know a lot of the things that went on behind the scenes, right? And without transparency from some of these issues, it's hard to comment exactly. But just from looking at it from afar, I think we mentioned some of the things. It's evident that Maria Sanchez, whatever people may think of that move or how she forced the trade, was not happy here. And at that point, she was not only your star signing, she was a player you decided to bet your future on.
Yes.
Again, big headline, right? With what was it, like the highest paid women's player in the NWSL at that time, right? And that was a big, again, for me, moves that aren't soccer based. They're more based to grab headlines, for PR. The focus hasn't been on soccer, and I mean, I was watching that Prime broadcast the other night. The broadcast itself, it's not even focused on soccer. They're talking about how great of a mother Alicia Chapman is because they show video of the team arriving and she's got the baby in her hands. They're interviewing Ryan Garris and asking about how hard it is to come back. And look, these are stories, right? These are part of it, but it's almost like there's so much focus on those personal stories than there is on the X's and O's of what's going on with the team itself. Why isn't it?
Yeah, Victor, I will push back here a little bit. I think those are important stories. I think those are stories that need to be told.
Entire story, Alex.
Fair enough. But
you have to get followers somehow. So I think that now, knowing that you're not going to make it to the playoffs, might as well try to sell the team or make people actually fall in love with the players and not so much their standings. I mean.
But what about the stories of the other players that aren't mothers? I mean, why are we hearing about them? Why aren't we hearing about why Diana Ordonez isn't playing?
No. I'm going to disagree with you. Because like I mentioned in the last podcast, I do think that the Dash has done a better job than other seasons to let the fans or reporters, since they're not very transparent. When I stalk their social media and they put up stories like this, it also gives me ideas, because I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Oh, they're doing this and this. So it just gives you more of an insight of who these players really are off the pitch. And that gives you an extra oomph or extra wanting to follow these players or follow this team. There's always in Miss Universe, there's also like the queen, the princess, and Miss Congeniality. Maybe the Dash is going to be Miss Congeniality. We don't know. So I'm for these kind of posts.
I want to be the queen, by the way, just for the record. Victor, I get your point, and there has to be a balance here. When the season's over, which apparently came for the Dash early, you've got to find something to talk about. Now, I'll let you have the last word on this one, Victor, but I will mention something that I found interesting. Coach Ricky talking about how the start of what's coming next is already underway. They said that every year, Alex. Every year it's the same thing. Oh, the future is bright. Oh, the best is yet to come. Oh, we've heard this story year in after year out, and it's the same thing. And how many years has it been now? And I granted it's different head honchos and it's a different interim coach, but at the end, you should have watched this thing. I think you can go back on Prime. They showed a little carousel of all the coaches that have been around. That just about summed it up for me. And I mean, look, maybe not enough people are going to care. Honestly, that's the truth as well. Not enough people are going to care for this to be a big deal with Houston Dash. But if the focus was on soccer, if we had more conversation about why the team is failing, if it had the attention of like an NFL team or an MLB team,
what went on with the coach? Why all the hush hush, right? Why is Diana Ordonez not playing? If this is about the future, and you're telling me you're not betting it on a player like that, why isn't she getting minutes? Is it because she hasn't signed a new contract like everybody else? Who's making these decisions to sign all these contracts? What are they building? And who's building it? Because at the end, you don't even have a GM yet. You don't have a permanent head coach yet, at least none that you care to tell your fans, your public about. So for me, I'm sorry. I try to be positive about this. I agree with you, but at the end, it's a broken record.
It is. Look, I don't think anyone can hide that, can shy away from that. The sad part to me, because I love the sport and I love women's soccer in particular, Victor and Laura, is that if nobody cares whether they win or lose, it talks about where the sport is. Recently, the WNBA finals just took place, right? And the league now talks about how much money they're losing, even though there might be a push here for ratings. And the criticism that I've seen on social media about the quality of play still reminds me that there are a lot of people that don't support women's sports. I love soccer. I love women's sports and women's soccer in general, women's sports as well. And I've seen the quality improve year in, year out. We're in a very interesting time where I think the sport is going to continue to improve, and I love the quality. But there's still a fight, an uphill battle, Victor and Laura, to make these viable businesses. And that's part of the calculation, Laura. This is a business. And when nobody's paying attention, whether you win or lose, or it doesn't matter or have a consequence, what do you do? And that's part of the balance. Maybe in 10 years this will be different. Laura, I'll give you the final word on where we are with the Dash and what needs to happen. And yes, I think there needs to be some more urgency, some more accountability, and that goes straight to the top.
No, and I agree. And I honestly think that Diana's going to leave. I don't think that she's going to want to stay with the Dash, whether they want to admit it, but just, kind of just looking into the mysterious ball of information that they do give us or don't give us. I honestly think that she will not stay. And I could be wrong. Hopefully I'm not. The Dash really needs to get with it. I think that there's so much potential, and every year, again, it's like this frustration that I feel every year. Like Victor said, they feed us the same thing. This year, it's going to be beautiful flowers. The sun's going to shine, after so much rain and blah, 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 and yada, yada. And, I believed it the first time. I was skeptical the second time, but the third time I was like, yeah, right. Like, I'm over it, like, honestly. And it doesn't make it fun because, again, as a woman, as somebody that loves soccer so much, to see this going on and to see, again, these players putting their all and not getting the results that they want because of things that are out of their control. And, Victor might say, oh, you're babying them. They're professionals, they're adults. But at the end of the day, there's only things that you can or can't do with what you're given. And to me, it's just kind of, it's frustrating because it would be something different if I would see these players, moping around, not touching the ball, not trying to do anything. I'm like, man, get them all out of here. But the thing is that that's not the case. So, it's sad to me because a lot of these players are international players. We have players that play for Nigeria. We have players that have played for Canada, the U.S., sure. Venezuela, Mexico, so much. So there's so much potential. And to see these results, for me, it's heartbreaking. If you want to look at it in the way of economic, for me, if I was Ted Siegel, I'm like, okay, everybody's getting fired. I'm like, everybody's getting freaking fired because I want to make my money and we're not doing it how it has to be done. And just start from scratch again then, because you're going to start from scratch anyways. Might as well really start from scratch.
That could be a pathway to say, listen, I take this so seriously that we're cleaning house and we're starting at zero. So I think maybe a little bit more balance would prevail in that decision, but that's fair.
Mm-hmm. Well, he also mentioned, I remember when I interviewed when he first, bought the team, he was like, oh, I have daughters, so I really support the team. And just because I'm not a local doesn't mean I'm not going to, feel the wins or the losses of this team. I'm waiting for that. Because as of right now, it doesn't seem like he cares for like 100% sure as a Houstonian.
The last word then from Laura Gomez on the Houston Dash, and then on the Houston Dash. But a few minutes ago, talking about the NWSL, you mentioned a crystal ball. You mentioned the word ball, and there was a launching of a new franchise, and we're taking a look at one of the teasers, one of the promos, if you will, for the new Boston.
The only teaser that made it.
The only one that made it, and the focus was on balls and how there were old balls in Boston, and it was time to change that and get new balls in the Boss Nation Football Club, as it was announced. Victor, I'll go to you first, but your take on what this was, what it wasn't, how people are up in arms about it, and not necessarily the best PR move that I've ever seen, right?
Again, when you don't put the focus on soccer, you open yourself up to things like this. Not the best rollout. The name, I think, is even worse. But there was some backlash on this, and I don't know if it was necessarily transphobic, but that's what it was called. And of course, the team, right, the club had to issue a statement apologizing and look, we'll see where it goes from here.
Literally apologizing, yes.
But I don't know if that's necessarily how it came across or what. But at the end, that's how it was received. And look, they got it rough here to start this launch. Didn't come off as expected. But there's an NWSL coming to Boston. I guess we know that. And Louisville is an example that people use as a team that, it was going to be called Proof Louisville FC. There was backlash on that name, not maybe the controversy that came with this one. But now it's the team obviously known as Racing Louisville. So there's still some hope there or a precedent for this to change.
Laura, when there are groups behind the scenes launching clubs, I'm sure a lot of conversations, I hope, are taking place. And I'll let you take it here shortly. But my shock to this was there an adult in the room that actually watched this and thought this through and said, you know what, maybe we should have a second plan or a different rollout? It doesn't mean to me, and I'm going to say this, and I'm going to offend a lot of people, I'm sure, that a serious person was in the room when this was thought up. Laura, your take?
Diversity matters. That's what I want to say. Diversity matters. And it shows that they did not have this in their marketing team, in their social media team, in their, I don't know, C-suite team, everybody team, I don't know. But there was a lack of diversity. There was a lack maybe of people feeling comfortable saying, this is not it. Because not only did they mess it up visually, but they also kept saying balls, 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 only showing men's sport, which is offensive to me because you're talking about a women's sport that's coming in and you're not talking about the past team that was there. Now, for those of you that don't know, Boston had a women's team up until 2018. The Boston Breakers were the team that were there, right? And unfortunately, they folded. They thought that they were perhaps going to be able to be bought out by New England Revolution. That didn't happen. They had to shut down. It was no longer a team. So instead of showing the rich history of women's soccer, they have Harvard, they have other teams there showing women's sports, women's soccer. They showed balls and men. So for me, it was kind of like, okay, so this is all you had to do. I mean, they had Tom Brady. Bro, like, you're going to tell me there was nobody else that, was part of the, Boston Breakers back then that could have, done a cameo for people to feel nostalgic and say, finally, we have a soccer team here. Because I know even though the team wasn't there, there's people that still have those jerseys. I mean, when the women's NWA team in Houston, the Comets left, I still have jerseys and I still wear them all the time because I'm upset that we don't have a team. So for me, I was just like, I can't believe this is what they're coming up with. And also it was not inclusive. And I've been to Boston. I was able to be there and talk to the, people there, and they're very, advanced in a lot of the things that they believe. So they left out a big community, LGBTQ plus community, the transgender community, and just saying balls, balls, balls. It was offensive to women and to the LGBTQ plus and trans community.
So look, a lot to talk about. We can't please everybody. I think that's part of any rollout. Someone can be offended by. I'm sure someone's offended right now. Sure.
Yes.
And if we become too sensitive, I get it. I think we have, and I think there's a balance. And I think any organization, Laura, Victor, friends, has to make a decision. This just seems so infantile. And we go back, Victor, to what we just discussed, how the NWSL and teams like the Dash, they need all the help they can get. The league shooting themselves in the foot this way doesn't help. Now, I'm going to throw out another theory, and I thought about this for about 3 minutes. I said, you know what? This actually could be, if this is intentional, then this could have been a great way to throw something out there, upset people, apologize about it, get attention, because they knew it was going to be infantile. They knew it was going to be, wow, a reaction was going to come. And now they're going to flip it and then go forward. Because as I understand it, Victor, there's not a person accountable, a face, a GM, et cetera. There is. Okay. Then maybe.
Well, not GM, president, and it's a woman.
Okay. So maybe, again, if this is very calculated and intentional, I'm saying this is a genius move. We're all talking about the Boss Nation team. Victor, am I overestimating the ability of this marketing blitz?
You never know these days. It could very well be that way, but I still think it's a lame rollout. It's a bad name and whatever.
Well, I guess there's Victor saying, move on to the next topic, please. Apparently.
No, but I think it's important to talk about it, because I do think, even with the name Boss Nation, supposedly what, the president went on an interview and said that it's Bostonian, but rearranged to like what it means. So, I mean, supposedly they've taken a lot of time to really come up with the colors. The colors are green,
I'm sure they
green, black, and raspberry.
Look, I take Victor's point here, Laura. If I'm an owner of this team and I look at the bill from some marketing entity that did this, and I wish we could call the name out of the marketing entity. I have no problem with that. I hope they remember what they've done. I would say that was money not well spent. And again, unless this is really calculated and they knew they were doing this ahead of time, and I don't know if I can give them that much credit, this is not a positive way to add to the NWSL. So they're talking a little bit about the NWSL. Quickly, I know the NWSL playoffs are coming up. The season almost done. As you mentioned, we the Dash and our broadcast will have one more. And we'll talk on our next podcast more about the playoffs, Laura. But in general terms, this Orlando team, which, by the way, finally did lose a game, is a potencia, is a very, very good team.
No, yeah. I mean, they're the only team as of right now, if I'm not mistaken, that they're like fully classified, like officially. It's amazing to watch. I think that for me, having so many good players on there, I think it's amazing to see them in this position. And again, I've always admired Marta, and I see that she might retire soon. She said in one of the interviews that she was retiring from the Brazilian national team. So, her retirement from the game completely might be coming soon. So I would love for her to actually win it all. Obviously, she wasn't able to do it, in the past, what was it, the Olympics? She wasn't able to win. So I think that this would be kind of like a good way to kind of say bye, to her legacy in the NWSL and women's soccer in general.
In general, without a doubt, it would be a great way to part. We'll be keeping up, friends, with the NWSL playoffs, also the MLS playoffs here as we get closer to the end of 2024. We're going to switch gears now and talk about one of the series that we're working on. We're calling it The State of Soccer, meaning less than 2 years from the World Cup coming to the United States, Canada, and Mexico, and in particular to the state of Texas and to Houston. We're talking to different leaders about what the state of our soccer world is at the youth level, at the local level. And Victor, we had the opportunity, I did, to talk to Adrian Garcia, Commissioner of Precinct 2, Harris County Precinct 2, and he was talking to us about the changes of the Harris County Houston Sports Authority. And what was fascinating to me was that the emphasis of a change of its leadership, Janice Burke, was based on the World Cup and the importance of having someone in place that knew soccer and that, quote, knew the World Cup. And apparently that was not Janice Burke. We've had Chris Kennedy now named as the interim CEO of that entity. Victor, we're getting a little bit more information. We briefly talked about this in our last podcast. The way I'm interpreting this, the way I heard it from Adrian Garcia, was that, you know what? This, in fact, is a growth of the sport and giving full importance to what's coming with the World Cup. Victor, do you see it that way? Is this a way that in many ways is growing the importance of the sport in our city?
Let's hope so. Again, maybe the bar is low a little bit with Janice Burke and comparing, Chris Kennedy as the next best soccer person in charge. I still say Oliver Luck was out there, former president, I believe, of the Houston Harris County Sports Authority. But I mentioned it last week. He's in that political hemisphere. Maybe he's well suited. He's got the connections. Ultimately, if he'll be judged by what he does here in these next 2 years, let's see it. I think there was a lot of promises about the legacy that the World Cup was going to leave. And again, 2 years out, I get to see a lot of the impact coming from this World Cup. Monterrey, for example, recently had a Legends game, a FIFA Legends game down there, to promote the upcoming World Cup. There's events going on in some of these other host cities, right? What have we done in Houston? You don't even see the World Cup like in other cities. You don't see it even advertised. Dynamo at Dash Games. I haven't seen any signage about the World Cup. When we talk about, again, building up to what's supposed to be, the biggest World Cup, after obviously what 94 was, and maybe the only one for a long, long time, where is the impact that it's leaving behind, at least in the buildup to this?
Well, Victor, I'm going to interrupt you. And I think maybe that's making the point that Adrian Garcia and others are making to us, which is we've had 2 years since this announcement, roughly, and nothing's been done. You're right. There is no marketing as far as we can tell, or certainly not much of it. So maybe that was the issue with Janice Burke. And I'm not saying I pretend to know that. But you're right.
But they still wasted 2 years. I mean, they could have wasted just the one and have made a position then. But whatever, it's all done now.
Well, it might be all done, Victor, but now there's a time to reset. And Laura, is this the right person at the right time to hit the reset button? I rely and I believe Adrian Garcia. Yes, he's part of the political class in our city, in our county, and he's always tried to be, to me, from my perspective, someone that's in the middle of trying to work with all sides, regardless of your political affiliation. But I know that in this world, that's not necessarily always a pure way of the politics play a part in everything we do. Your take on this change, Laura, number one, and what it means to have an opportunity to reset. And now I guess it really means let's see what the results are, right, with the new leader.
I mean, if they are doing marketing or have been doing marketing, I mean, they've done a bad job, because if you, Victor, myself, don't know anything about it and we're involved with soccer day in, day out, then they're doing something wrong if the people that cover it or know about it aren't knowing, off the bat what they're doing. Victor mentioned about, one of the other host cities doing things for the World Cup. Well, here recently in Houston, they had I think it was like America Chivas game, right? And there was a lot of talk about, the World Cup and this and that, but there was a lot of bureaucracy, in my opinion. They invited a lot of people that, maybe have power or are elite and, to this match, or they did like an event prior to, and et cetera, things like that. But honestly, for me, soccer is one of the games stadiums that is, by the people for the people. Honestly, it's one of the cheapest game in theory, because all you need is honestly, just a ball and some players to be able to play. So I think that they also need to concentrate to invite the correct people to these events, and not just people that you think, have some power. Yeah, they might have power maybe in the governing sense or in some other aspects, but you need to really focus in the soccer community, not just who you think that has power or not.
Well, let's talk about that. And forgive me for interrupting you, Laura, and because one of the comments I heard off the record was that everyone
off the record on the podcast.
Multiple people want the credit for bringing the World Cup here. And you start talking about ego. You just talked about who's on the list of being invited. Who are the people that are going to support? Look, this is a very interesting city when it comes to all of that. But someone wants to say, no, I'm the one that brought you the World Cup. I'm the one that did this. There are so many of those people out there that I'm sure it's confusing. And also, Laura, you and I, and Victor, you and I know this. At World Cup time at NRG, there are going to be people in those suites that today don't care about soccer. 5 years ago, didn't even know what the sport was. And and during that game, them and their friends are going to eat the free buffet, have the $1,000 tickets, and they've never lifted a finger for our sport in our city. That's the truth. The question is, what can we do, if anything?
Why does it? Yeah, and why does it have to be that way? It doesn't have to be that way. The reason that it's that way is because people are allowing it to. I think that, yes, you have to have, again, you might have to invite some influencers, but why invite influencers that are, people that only do makeup and they don't do things with soccer? Why not invite influencers that cover games, maybe as something fun that they do? Why don't you invite soccer moms? Why don't you invite, retired players and things like that? So for me, that's an issue of really missing the mark again, of really who's going to make a difference, and not only make a difference of, what Houston really can bring to the World Cup, but also on letting other people know. Because you might get in well with, like you mentioned, the C-suite, but that's going to get you maybe some far in some way, but you might fall short in what you were hired to do.
Victor, Laura, forget our egos for a moment, and all of you know that Uncle Alex has a huge ego. Victor, I'll throw out one name. Glenn Davis. Why is Mr. Glenn Davis not part of these committees, as far as I know, leading in some way, a spokesperson for soccer in the World Cup? I think is it because he's not recognized? Is it because he's fallen out of favor? Is it because the powers that be don't know that? That's number one. But I'll hit you with an even harder one. Where's the Latino and Spanish-speaking representation in leadership? Yes, Dr. Murillo is there, and I've seen her. She's part of the committee, and she's a good spokesperson for what's happening. Adrian Garcia, who I spoke with in this the State of Soccer series.
Non-soccer people.
You can.
But again,
argue,
what do they know about soccer?
You can argue.
They're
not soccer
and I
people.
mentioned that because look, they're community leaders, so you give them the space based on that. But there's also got to be a space for the local soccer leaders.
Sure.
Like you mentioned, Glenn, I think overall covers that all those bases. Like you said, the Latino population. Where's the representation there? The African population. There's leagues here.
Exactly.
Where are they? There's Asian leagues. Where are they included in all of this?
Sure.
But they don't care about that, Alex.
For
That's
women
the
too.
truth.
For women.
Whatever it is, they don't care. They don't care to bring all these groups in. Like you said, it's all about who takes the credit. It's all about being there when these events are going on, and it's about them getting the pat on the back or patting themselves on the back, congratulating themselves, like if it's because of them that these World Cup games are going to sell out. And what's more, look, because I'm not going to stress so much about things you can't control. That stuff's going to happen regardless.
Sure.
What is the legacy of the World Cup going to be? Are there going to be fields? Are we going to get some of these FIFA legends coming in for local camps? How is the legacy going to remain here in Houston? That still is the big question. If Connecticut can get it done, more power to them. But I mean, again, to be seen. A couple of murals and a few fundraisers to get a couple of $1,000 soccer balls or whatever it is to raise money isn't going to get it done. You get more community service out of the Houston Astros, right? Redoing some baseball fields or parks around town, getting the players out in the community. Again, where's the soccer equivalent of that? The local team, when it has the opportunity, doesn't do it, not to that extent. And look, this event, I'm not going to get the Chivas America in it because at the end it's an independently hosted thing. But yes, the local authority, the local, Harris County Sports Authority should try to get into some of these events and bring it all together. But, it's like beating a horse to death here. It's
Laura,
year after year the same thing.
Laura, I hear the frustration in Victor's voice and his comments, but I'll give you the last word. And friends, I do promise we'll stay on the story relative to the legacy, relative to who's involved, relative to what it means to all of us, whether we've covered the sport, whether we haven't covered the sport, whether it's inclusive or not, and we'll see it play out. So this is definitely an interesting twist in the Harris County Houston Sports Authority and the focus they have on the World Cup. Laura, the last word.
I agree with everything that Victor said, and I understand. I'm not dumb. I'm realistic. I know that, sometimes the world has to run by just people who think that they have power or they know people that know people that know people, blah, blah, blah. And I understand that. I've done it because, I've also worked a lot in communications and marketing. And sometimes I've invited, a reporter that might not cover soccer or might not cover the cause that I'm trying to sell that day, but they have connections that they can probably, do what they need to do and help me out, in the event. But for me, sometimes when I see these events, I'm like, who are these people? Like how did they tie in into Houston, or how do they tie in into the communities that need to be represented here? Like you just mentioned, people that are not invited that should be invited. Like for me would be, the keeper's notes. I want to say Jane Cooper.
Jen Cooper, yes.
She's the kind of person that you turn around and say, hey, what game did the, Dash play?
She's amazing.
June 4th. Exactly. And she'll be like, hold on, give me a second. And look for it. Like, why is she not, called on for questioning? Why is she not questioning, but to help foment the soccer as well? Because if you're going to do the World Cup, you might as well do it, the women and men, to just foment soccer in general and use this as an opportunity to help soccer grow in Houston, not to only sell tickets, but also to see the long run of the effect of the World Cup in Houston and for the local teams that are not doing as well as they can. So for me, There's a lot of frustration because I understand. Money makes the world go round. Connection makes the world go round. I've been a part of it. I've been out of it. But I love soccer more than I love my connections and more than I love money. So I think that the soccer for me, I'm a purist then because I want soccer to be for the people, by the people. Again, I just think that there needs to be better decisions made and not just to be buddies with somebody that you think has power or money.
Yeah, I love money. So anybody wants to throw it our way and sponsor Soccer Tejas, we would love it.
Nice plug-in.
Exactly. And by the way, I can hold up the product here if you'd like. By the way, I did want to give a shout out to our friends at 4WD, shameless self-promoter that I am. The cold brew, it's delicious. So yeah, we do like the money. The point in that is that there has to be a balance here, Victor and Laura. That's the last word on that topic, but we'll certainly continue to talk about the coming of the World Cup to our city, what it means, how it's being organized, and check out the series, The State of Soccer, on our channels, on our social media, in English and in Spanish, and we'll be talking to more people. Actually, I've got an interview scheduled with Mr. Chris Canetti, so we'll ask him some of these questions. And friends, we want your questions about what we should be asking. Do you feel you're a part of the process? Do you feel you're being included in having tickets, being inside the stadium, having opportunities to grow your business? And how do you get in front of the decision makers that can help this leave a positive legacy for our city? So we're way over time today. We're going to cut a few things here if you don't mind. But as we wrap up the latest edition of the Soccer Tejas podcast, I'll turn to you, Victor, first. What's on your mind? What are you thinking? Excuse me, we've already talked about it today, but we'll give you the microphone here as we close out the podcast.
We'll end it with the MLS playoffs. I think it'll be an interesting postseason here. Obviously, there'll be a lot of attention on what Inter Miami does. Again, I think that will be a free game on Apple TV, so we'll at least get to watch that one. And we'll see how it grows here over the next couple of months with these MLS playoffs, how the attention on the league changes and comes from all over the world. Because just on this FIFA Club World Cup announcement alone, I think it's gotten a lot of attention that MLS wouldn't get otherwise.
Victor, thank you for that. And obviously, we'll keep up with the playoffs here on the Soccer Tejas podcast. So we're looking forward to that. Laura, what are you thinking about here as we wrap up the podcast today?
I'm trying to think of how to take over the world, I think, because there's some things I want to rearrange. No, I mean, honestly, I think that if you love soccer, you love women's soccer, whether you want to admit it or not, because women are amazing athletes. So, give yourself a chance and watch a women's sport, watch a women's, soccer team play. We have one here, the Dash. You have an opportunity to go watch them. The tickets aren't expensive. You don't have to be stressed out because they already didn't make it to the playoffs. So it could be a grand old time. So I think women's soccer is on my mind.
That's what's on Victor's mind, on Laura's mind, on my mind, friends. I'll talk a little bit about youth soccer and something that was raised by, in one of my latest interviews with Charles Rotermel, the president of STISA, the regulation that youth soccer may or may not need. And maybe it is time for U.S. soccer to have a stronger and more important role in the many leagues that exist out there, in finding a way to have a pathway about what is a better or not so good or competitive league. I know it's difficult. I know it's impossible. I know very few people like the word regulation, but I think it's up to U.S. soccer to help us all better define the different leagues, the different approaches to the youth game. Is it a task? Absolutely. Is it difficult? Absolutely. Will it take years? Absolutely. But I think in the current environment of youth soccer, there's confusion from parents, confusion for players, confusion for coaches and clubs. And I think the only entity that can come in today and start trying to do something about it is U.S. soccer. So U.S. soccer at the youth level, you need to think about making it a priority to kind of clean up the landscape and give us some clarity about which direction we should be following. So that's what's on my mind. And friends, what's on your mind? If you have questions for us, if you have criticism, if you have ideas of where this podcast should go, we are welcome. So, Victor, as we wrap up today, what are you looking for here coming up this week? Playoff time, right?
That's right. Watch some of these games and just, again, see what the interest is here locally as well. I'll mention this cheap plug, right? Like they need anymore for, I think Pitch 25 is having the official watch party. But again, and I'm sure we'll dig into this in the off season or whenever we have some time, but if people can't watch the games, that's why also a restaurant program, a pub program is so important to stretch the distribution across the city, right? Yeah. Having a watch party in Pearland, having a watch party in Katy, having a watch party in the Woodlands, Channelview, all around town to grow the local product, just food for thought.
I like that. Last word for you this evening, Laura. It's a silent word, apparently.
No. I'm looking forward for Victor to share his password and username for Apple TV because I'm not signing up. So if MLS hears me, then we're reporters. We deserve to have easily access to the game that we're covering when we're not at the stadium. So yeah, that's gonna be my shameless pitch of the night.
There's the plug for getting her Apple the passwords, please, so she can cover the upcoming MLS playoffs. Victor, you're amazing. Laura, you're equally amazing. Friends, thanks to all of you for taking the time to be with us. So on behalf of our production staff, on behalf of Victor, on behalf of Laura, I'm Alex Parra. Thanks to all you that join us every time we put this together. We call it the Soccer Tejas Podcast. Until next time.